the way higher. Hello, I am a 30-year-old woman. My husband is 33. We've been together for 6 years and married for 3. Last year I made the single worst mistake of my life and had an affair with a male coworker. I have no excuse for what I did. It was wrong, selfish, and self-destructive. At the time I had excuses, but I now realize that that is exactly what they were. Excuses. My husband isn't perfect. Who is? He's got flaws like any other person. But he's been a loving partner, supportive and generous throughout our relationship. Last year we fought a lot over money. It was so bad for a while that we had no intimacy and I felt neglected and unloved. I made the horribly selfish decision to seek comfort from a male co-worker who had in the past made it clear to me that he was attracted to me. I'd always shut it down quickly before, but at last year's company Christmas party I was weak and I accepted his advances. We kissed after the party and began to text secretly to plan a tryst. This is the worst part of my betrayal. I had weeks between that party and the time we slept together to come to my senses and not do this, but I went ahead anyway. It was exciting and he paid attention to me and flattered me, and I was a weak and foolish person and played along. Then we met at a hotel and had slept together. I almost immediately regretted my decision. I felt dirty and cheap laying there in that hotel bed while my husband was off at work none the wiser. I actually started to cry right there, and my coworker only worried that I'd tell my husband and he'd get beaten up or that his fiancée would find out. After this happened, I immediately rededicated myself to being a good wife. I opened up to my husband about my feelings of neglect. He apologized for making me feel that way. He was so open to us working things out, it made me realize how poorly I'd treated him. I was racked with guilt over what I'd done. I vowed to myself that I'd be the best wife I could to him. And this past year has been wonderful on the surface. We've communicated so well, our financial situation has been much better. Things are good, but I've been stressed, nonetheless. I've been suffering from guilt and remorse. Every time my husband would go out of his way to do something thoughtful or sweet, I'd almost break down in tears. A couple months ago I started getting shingles. I was told it could be from stress. My husband was so understanding and kind. He thought I was stressed from work. Right at the beginning of November he surprised me with a trip to a cabin for a long weekend to help me get my mind off my stress. I just couldn't take it and I broke down sobbing. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't continue to lie to him. I broke down and confessed everything to him. At first, he sat there in total shock. He asked if I was serious. I said yes. I was so sorry, but yes. He sat there for a long time just not moving or saying anything. Then he asked me what he'd done to deserve this. I told him nothing. He didn't deserve this at all. He asked me why. Why would I do this to him? To us. I apologized again and said I had no excuse. I was wrong and I had no excuse. He got up and left the room and ignored me the rest of the night. When it was time for bed, I came into the bedroom and he told me to go sleep in the guest room because he didn't want to share a bed with me anymore. So, I've been sleeping in the guest room ever since. For the next 2 weeks he wouldn't speak to me, would barely look at me. He would eat with me. He's been spending all his time at home, either in the garage or down in the basement watching television. I honestly think before this week we may have passed one of 2 sentences between us. I've been trying to give him space. I'm on eggshells because I'm terrified he's going to tell me he wants a divorce and ask me to leave. He owned the house before we met, so I think he'd be within his rights to throw me out. On Monday this week I tried to start showing him nice gestures. I made him his favorite dinner Monday, and when he came home from work, he took one look at me and said he'd lost his appetite. He made a bowl of cereal and went down in the basement again. Yesterday I asked him quietly if he was going to come with me Sunday to have our family picture taken for Christmas. This is a tradition in my family. My parents, all my brothers and sisters and their spouses, and all my nieces and nephews get together and we take a picture. I have had the heart to tell anyone in my family what I've done. I'm so ashamed of myself I can't bring myself to do it. He asked me why I thought he'd want to go anywhere with me and said maybe I should take my boyfriend instead. I said I don't have a boyfriend, I have a husband I love very much who I'd do anything in the world to keep. He said I'd do anything except keep my panties on while he's not around. He was getting angrier and angrier. I've never really seen him so angry. I wasn't exactly afraid of him though. It wasn't like he was threatening me. He was just angry, and the look of hatred he was giving me broke my heart. I again told him how sorry I was and begged him to tell me what I can do to try and fix this. He just laughed and said it's probably broken beyond repair at this point. I said don't say that, please don't say that. He asked me how the crap I thought he was supposed to feel, and I had some nerve to think he'd go get a picture taken with me. I said it's fine, I'll tell my family that you're sick. He asked why I haven't told my parents what I did. I said because I'm so ashamed of myself. He said maybe he'd come Sunday and tell them himself. I asked him please don't. Then he said this, don't worry, I'm not going to broadcast to the world that my wife is a W. It devastated me to hear him call me that. This man who I love so much called me a W. I just stood there and took it though because he's right to be angry with me. I cried and he told me to spare him the phony tears. Then he told me to get the crap out of his basement and leave him alone. Then he broke down crying. The only time I've ever seen him cry before was when his dad died 2 years ago. But there he sat sobbing. I put my hand on his shoulder and he told me not to touch him. Just the feeling of me touching him makes him sick. Before I left, I said quietly one more time that I do love him, that I'm sorry for hurting him and I'll do whatever I can within my power to save our marriage. He just waved me off, so I went upstairs. We haven't spoken at all since. He's been working 12-hour days since this all started so he can avoid me as much as possible. When he came home tonight, he took a shower and immediately went down the basement again. My stomach is on knots with pain, sorrow and fear that I've destroyed my marriage. Is there anything I can do to save us? I have no feelings for him at all. I haven't seen or spoken to him in almost 8 months. He got a new job and moved out of state. And no, I don't believe his fiancée deserves this any more than my husband did. There is no prenup. However, if he does ask me to leave, I will. I've already done enough damage and I'm not going to try to take something that belongs to him. If he does decide he wants a divorce, I already decided that I won't make it difficult on him. I hope and pray it won't come to that, but on that eventuality I would move out if it's what he wants. I have thought about all of this over the last week. I want to fight for my marriage, but I understand that he may never forgive me. If he decides that he wants a divorce, I won't fight him over anything. If he asks me to leave, I will. As for the people calling me a cheater and a liar, you are correct. I am exactly that. I have no defense for what I did. I realize now that I am going to have to tell my friends and family what I did. If my marriage truly is over, they're all going to want to know why. On the outside, it looks to all of them that we're a perfectly happy couple. If we break up, many will assume it's because of something he did, and I will not allow them to think I love him when he's the wrong party. I am to try to get my husband to communicate to me exactly what it is he wants from me. Does he want me to leave? Does he want a divorce? If he does want a divorce, while I will be crushed, I will go along with it and will not be asking for anything in return. I will not fight him over anything and will try to make it as easy as possible. I'm willing to let him go if that's what will help him to start healing. If by some miracle he says he's willing to try to work through this, I will do anything he asks. That includes quitting my job immediately, informing the other man's fiancé, informing my family and friends, and going to counseling for myself or as a couple if that's what he wants. In fact, I'm going to look into counseling for myself regardless. I will also allow him full access to all my devices and social media in order to show him that I haven't done anything like this since that one time. Right now, though, I am going to allow him to have his space and let him process this in his own way. After I tell my family, I may ask my parents if I can come stay with them for a while so my husband can have his space. Right now, there isn't much else I can do except wait for my husband to decide what he wants to do. I won't push him for a decision. He may still ask for that divorce once his head clears. However, if you ask him what you can do to make it right, he may consider that instead if it is the most forefront choice in his mind. There's literally no reason on earth for him to forgive me. If that's the case, I will accept the consequences of what I've done. The guy I was talking to was making snide remarks repeatedly. He wasn't trying to help. I blocked him. OBS, she hasn't responded, but I sent her screenshots of our conversations on Facebook Messenger pre and post hookup. Last night I wrote my husband a letter, nearly 8 pages long, taking the advice of several posters, and here I spelled out everything that happened during my affair. I left nothing out and made no effort to make myself look like anything but what I am, a liar and a cheater. I also told him that while I can repeatedly apologize for my actions, that my word means nothing to him because I understand that he can't trust me right now. I said I know he doesn't owe me anything, but I'm hoping we can sit down and discuss this. I also told him that I sent the message to this woman and I am willing to tell my family and friends if that's what he wants. He may not want me to do that, and after thinking it over I feel they were right. I have already humiliated him enough. If he doesn't want to hurt people know right now, I won't tell them. If he does, then I will tell them. The reason I wrote a letter is because right now I feel like he doesn't want anything to do with me. If I were to try to start this conversation in person, he would simply shut me down. When I handed him the letter, he didn't immediately rip it up or throw it out. He simply took it from me and said okay when I said I'd like him to read it. Again, I'm not going to push him. My husband approached me this morning and said, "We need to talk later today." I said okay. He said he has some things he promised his sister he'd help her out with at their mom's house, and he'd be home sometime around 4 o'clock today. So, I think he read my letter and has figured out what he has to say to me and perhaps how he wants to deal with what I have done. My stomach is in knots and I'm so nervous I feel like I'm going to be sick. I have no idea what he's going to say or ask of me. For all I know, he could ask me for a divorce. I'm prepared to accept whatever his decision is. Right now, all I care about is helping him to heal from what I've done, and if us no longer being together is what he needs to heal, then I will accept that. Update. Well, my husband and I finally spoke. He said he hasn't processed this whole thing yet. He's been wavering between anger and pain for 3 weeks since I told him. He says one minute he's prepared to throw me out of the house and the next he's determined to find a way to fix our marriage. His main question was why. Why would I do this? He said he's racked his brain trying to figure out what brought us to this point. I told him about my feelings at the time, which I know are terrible, weak excuses for what I did. He said I should have talked to him instead of this. Anything but this. He asked me questions that I never thought I'd have to answer because I never thought in my worst nightmare that I'd ever cheat. But I answered all of his questions honestly, knowing that some of the answers would cause him pain but also knowing that to hide anything at this point would definitely kill my marriage. I told him that I know it rings hollow but I do live him and I am ready to do whatever it takes to help him heal from what I did. He asked questions and information about the other guy, which I gave him, hoping to God he doesn't do something dumb like go beat the guy up. He asked me if I really told the other guy's fiancée and I said yes. I messaged her. Apparently, my husband has done some digging of his own and knows who she is and is prepared to contact her himself. Somehow, he's got her phone number. I'm not sure how, but he had a number he believes is hers and he's going to call her. I haven't heard back from her. What can I say, but I understand he wants to make sure this guy's fiancée knows what happened. He also said he wants to read anything I have that was texted between me and the guy. He wants to look through my phone, iPad, and computer, which I agreed to and gave him all my passwords. He finally told me he's not sure we can save our marriage or if he even wants to. He's made it clear that he doesn't think he will ever trust me again and may never trust anyone again. So, he's decided he's going to see a therapist by himself to work all of this out. I asked about couples counseling and he said he's not ready for that yet. He doesn't even know if he ever will want to do that. He also told me he's been in contact with an attorney so he can know what his legal rights are if he decides to ask me for a divorce. He made it clear that there's a very good chance that this is going to end up in a divorce and told me to be ready for that. He made it clear to me that he will fight me tooth and nail when it comes to his pension and 401k. I told him if it comes to that I won't make any claim to any of his retirement benefits. I could do that to him after the damage I've already inflicted. So, he said that until after the holidays we'll put on a brave face because he doesn't want our problems to ruin either of our family's Christmas. But after the new year he thinks the best thing for us is to separate while he figures out what it is he wants. He says it's much too painful for him to be around me right now because it's constant reminder of what I did. He said I can continue to sleep in the guest bedroom until I can find a place to live. I agreed that I will move because, as I mentioned in my first post, he has owned this house since before we started dating. He's put so much work into turning it into a beautiful home that I could never bring myself to fight him for the right to stay here. I told him I'm going to have to tell my family and friends what had happened once I move, and he said he knew that. I told him I will be honest with them and make it clear that our separation is because of my affair and not something he did. Again, he made it clear that he's not certain he even wants to try to save our marriage because he doesn't know if he'll ever trust me again. And that's the worst thing because he told me he loves me even after what I did to him, but the trust is gone. I understand why he feels this way and it's something I will have to live with. He also said something that made me realize how rotten I've been. He said he isn't going to use our separation as an excuse to see other women because he wouldn't do that to me. He said his first instinct was to meet someone else and get revenge that way, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. I am powerless to even say anything about his because what could I say if he did that? I know he could easily find someone. My husband is a really good-looking guy and I've become accustomed to other women looking at him and sometimes even trying to flirt with him when we're out. He'd always smile and flash his wedding ring at them. Yeah, I realize now just how brutally I've treated him. I won't end up on the street. Financially, I'll be fine if we do end up divorced. I will not do anything to punish my husband if he decides to ask for a divorce. Yes, it is his pension and 401k. He worked all the years at his job. I have my own retirement. I'll be fine moving forward. As for the house, I couldn't bring myself to try to force him to give up something he's worked so hard on over the years. Right now, we're basically coexisting. I'm still living at the house, but we still sleep in separate rooms. He told me he doesn't want to share a bed with me right now and he isn't sure if he ever will again. While it stings, I completely understand. We both go to work and when we're home, we communicate when it comes to something involving our families or something like that, but there's no more talking about our days or anything like that. I do miss this, but again I know he needs his space. We plan on doing all the normal holiday things we usually do to keep up appearances. This was his idea because he doesn't want to make our family's holidays about us potentially splitting up. He said after the new year he'd prefer if I moved out of the house. He said I can stay until I find a place. I know that legally I have rights to stay here despite the fact that he owned the house before we were even dating. However, I also know that it's pointless of me to make this difficult on him. If he needs space, I'm going to give it to him. I also know this means I'm going to have to disclose to my family and friends what I've done. So, I confided in my older sister what's been going on, and needless to say she wasn't too happy with me and my choices. So again, I answered all her questions honestly and told her that I'm afraid my marriage is more than likely over and that after the new year I'm going to find a place to stay. I have also contacted an attorney in case he decides he wants a divorce. I am not going to try to make it hard for either of us. He and I have already talked about splitting things up if he decides this is over, and we are pretty much in agreement on most things. There are some things we'll have to hammer out. That's about it right now. Oh, and both of us have contacted therapists and are going to be starting individual counseling. My husband is not adult, and I can promise you he's a far more intelligent than you'll ever live to be. No, I don't want to get rid of him. Every piece of advice I've received on trying to save our marriage says to not spare any details when answering questions posed by him. Yes, I do want to keep him, but I've also made up my mind not to put him through more if he asks for a divorce. It's not to get rid of him. He's made it pretty clear that's the way he's leaning, and he's simply waiting for after the holidays so that my drama doesn't ruin the season for our families. It angered me that this guy painted my husband as a stupid person who's too dumb to think straight. I know he's seething with me right now, and he's kept his anger under control in an attempt to make this as civil as possible. Yes, I agree that it's 99% chance that this is over. However, this poster made it sound like I enacted a devious plan from day one to get rid of my husband, and that's not the case. I'd literally give or do anything right now for him to forgive me, but I've come to the realization that he's already mentally moving on from our marriage. Update: my husband and I had a fight, confrontation, I'm not sure what to call it, on Christmas evening. On Christmas morning, my husband decided he didn't want to spend the holiday with me. He had previously said he was willing to put on a brave face for the sale of both our families. Well, he decided on Christmas morning that he wasn't willing to do that and that we should each go to our own family's celebration. So, I was questioned by no mother as to why my husband has been avoiding my family since November. My husband has grown quite close to my parents since his father passed away, and I know it was starting to bother my parents that he hasn't been coming around them. At the end of the evening, after my brothers and sisters left, I finally told my parents what has been going on. Suffice to say, my parents, especially my father, are very disappointed in my actions. A little background on them. My parents are Mexican-American immigrants and are pretty socially conservative. They are both devoted Catholics, and they are both horrified that I stepped outside my marriage. Both of my parents told me that they are really embarrassed and disappointed in me. My father right now doesn't even want to speak to me, and he told me I need to beg my husband for forgiveness and hope he doesn't leave me. So that's my family situation now. On Christmas night, my husband came home quite drunk from his brother's house. Now, this is so uncharacteristic of him to drive drunk. He doesn't even really drink very much. But he was drunk on Christmas, and I told him he should have called me to come get him or had one of his brothers drive him, and he shouldn't have driven drunk. He took this opportunity to tell me off in pretty rough words. He was as angry as I've ever seen him. He told me that my actions have destroyed every memory he and I have together. He said he can't think of one good memory that we share without the thoughts of me cheating creeping in. He said he's going to find my AP and beat him up. He knows where the guy lives. He knows where he works. He knows all this stuff about him. I gave him a lot of the information, trying to be open and honest, and he did internet research on his own. Now, I only asked him to please not do anything stupid out of concern for my husband. It's not that I think my AP would hurt him. I know my husband can definitely best him up. I don't want my husband to go to jail over this. When I begged him not to do anything, he said I was protecting my boyfriend. This angered me as he keeps referring to this man as my boyfriend, so I lashed back at him out of anger. So, we ended up in a shouting match in our kitchen with me asking him just what it is he wants from me. I seriously told him I'll take a lie detector if he believes I've had any contact with this man since he moved. He said all he wants from me is to be out of his life, and that he hated me and wished he'd never met me and wasted the last 6 years of his life on a liar and a W.R.E. He told me he wants me out in a week, and then he went to bed. That was our Christmas. So, we avoided each other all week. I finally had to talk to him about something involving our car lease this week. It's coming up in February, so I had to ask him what we're doing about it. He told me he's not renewing the lease and I'm on my own when it comes to getting another car. He leased my car in his name because his credit score is better than mine and I've been making the payments. So, I told him he expects me to find a place to live in a new car by February. I could tell he was getting angry all over again, so I went to leave the room and he told me if I could have kept my legs closed while his back was turned, none of this would have happened. We spent night apart too. I stayed home as I feel like my family is really not happy with me now. He went out with his brothers and came home sometime after 1, which is when I went to bed. It was the first time since I met him that he and I were apart on New Year's, and it really drove home to me how far apart we are right now. This morning when he woke up, he drank coffee and gave me a dirty look when I went into the kitchen. He got up to leave and I figured another day of us avoiding each other. But he stopped and asked how this happened. How did our relationship come to this, that we hurt each other so much? I didn't know how to answer him. I'm just now starting therapy to figure out why I did this to us. There's got to be something self-destructive about me that caused it. I can't really blame him. He's never been abusive or distant. Even now when he gets angry with me and yells, I never feel scared of him. I feel like he's venting his anger at me. I told him I wish I knew what is wrong with me that I'd do this, and that while I know my words mean nothing to him, I truly am sorry for hurting him. He apologized for the name he's called me when he's angry. He said he alternates his mood every day. He said one day he wants to throw me out and divorce me, and the next he wants to hug me and tell me we can work this out. He cried while he told me this. He said he's in hell because even though he wants to hate me, he still loves me and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know if he'll ever trust me again, but he's also afraid he'll never find anyone again or be able to move on with his life. So, he said that he is going to see a therapist starting January 10th to try to sort through all his feelings. He also said he really isn't sure if he wants me to move out, and he didn't really mean he wanted me out in a week. That's the thing. He's got all this anger and resentment for me right now, but he's still worried about me being able to find a place to live. He also told me that he hasn't really told his family what's going on yet. They just think he and I are fighting right now. He feels like if we ever do try to work this out, that he doesn't want his family, especially his brothers, to know, because they'll never be able to look at me the same, and that might damage our relationship even more. So, we ended up actually talking calmly for nearly an hour this morning. I told him about my parents, and he seemed genuinely hurt that they thought he was mad at them for something. He really does love my parents like his own. His father is gone, and he's never been particularly close to his mom. He again told me he's spoken to an attorney in order to know his rights in case he decides to move on. He suggested I do the same thing. I said I'd look into it. I was thinking of talking to my parents' attorney about this. Like right now we're being civil, but you never know how things scam change. While I'm not in the mood to take things like his pension or house, there are things we share that we'll need to work out if we do split. He told me last night he just went to the bar with his brothers and they dropped him off right at our house. I said I feel like I don't have the right to ask him what he's been up to, and I'd understand if he felt like he needed to get back at me with some woman. Of course, I don't want him to, but how can I tell him not to? I have no moral high ground at all when it comes to that. My husband is a really attractive guy, and I know he'd have no problem finding a willing woman. But he said he's got enough woman problems in his life right now without involving another one. And he actually for one brief second gave me his patented smart-ass smirk that I've loved since the day I met him and despaired of ever seeing again. So, as he went to get dressed to go out and clean the garage, he told me that no matter how this year works out between us, that he does love me. I told him I love him too. We agreed that we need to talk like this at least once a week. There was no kiss or hug, and I still feel like we are a long, long way away from him ever being affectionate toward me. Maybe that will never happen again, but I think he got a lot off his chest. A lot of people asked about my AP and his fiancée. I did message her on Facebook. I also got a response from her. Not very polite, and she had a lot of choice things to say to me, but the gist of it was that they had already ended their engagement because she suspected him of sleeping with someone else, and that she also suspected us from the time we worked together. She then said my husband had also contacted her, and that I don't deserve him, and she hoped he leaves me. So, there's that. First off, I would not think of trying to take his house from him. He owned it already when we met. He turned it from a dump into a beautiful home, all with his own hands and hard work. How could I imagine trying to take that from him? His pension I have no interest in taking. It's his, and I have my own pension and retirement. We do have some community property which we would have to figure out. There's a boat which we bought and some other things, but right now I'm not thinking of things like that. My comment. So, Opus, I'm curious why. 1. You broke things off with your AP, other than the bad bonding. 2. If your feelings for him were of such low level that bad bonding was a deal breaker, why betray your husband for him? 3. Why betray your husband if you still loved him? I don't expect you to answer these questions, but they are likely things your own husband is wondering. It might be helpful for you to be able to answer them in a way that gives him the ability to wrap his head around the reason you did it and give him some confidence in why you wouldn't let it happen again.